What's up and welcome to My Point of View. I am your fat and opinionated host, also known as Cinema Shogun. Now, how many of you all have heard of the serial unaliver BTK? Now, if you haven't heard of him, that's probably a good thing, and I wouldn't suggest that you do any research on him unless you want to be highly disturbed. Well, we've been talking about Bryan Kohberger a lot on this channel, and it turns out that Bryan Kohberger studied under Catherine Ramsland, who is actually like an expert on BTK. She wrote a book on BTK. In fact, she's been in contact with BTK for years. She knows BTK better than anyone on earth, even his own family. So a lot of people thought it was weird that Bryan ultimately, allegedly, committed this heinous crime, and he was studying under Catherine Ramsland. So people were wondering if Bryan maybe had some type of obsession with BTK, considering the fact that he studies under the BTK expert. Now, BTK's daughter, she's, I don't know if to call her an activist or what, but she's kind of well known in the true crime community. She speaks out at crime cons and conventions and things of that nature. And she believes, and she spoke out and said, with her own words, not mine, that she believes Bryan Kohberger could have been in contact with her father. And I think it kind of triggered her and all that good stuff. She believes that Bryan Kohberger could have been in contact with her father because his mentor, his teacher, his professor, was in contact with her father. Now, somehow, some way, BTK caught wind of this in jail. I'm guessing, like mainstream news outlets are reaching out to him to see if he had spoken to Bryan Kohberger. He denies ever speaking to Bryan Kohberger. We actually go into detail about everything he said about that over on my main channel, Cinema Shogun. But turns out that's not all he said. Now, over in that video on my main channel, we talk about how he denied these allegations, but now BTK is speaking out again. And he believes that himself, now, like I said, if you don't know who BTK is, then it's probably a good thing. But if you know who BTK is, then yeah. He says that he believes that Bryan Kohberger has serial killer traits just like him. He straight up says that he believes Bryan Kohberger has serial killer traits just like him. Now, I'm sorry, but when did this even become a thing? We got serial killers in jail adding their commentary to true crime cases that are going on out here in the free world. We got serial killers from jail shouting out other serial killers. We got serial killers in jail denying rumors that were made about other killers. What in the hell is going on in today's world? It is so insane and weird, but this is where we're at. So BTK actually has a lot to say about Bryan Kohberger, and we are about to go over all of that right now. So without further ado, let's go ahead and hop right in. The BTK serial unaliver says Bryan Kohberger shares some of his traits, and that one of his own attacks, a quadruple unaliving, is eerily similar to the Idaho student slayings. Dennis Rader, who gave himself the moniker Blind Torture Kill, tells TMZ in a new email he believes Kohberger would lie in wait for his victims, stalking them and casing their home. All of this, BTK says, was much like I did, referencing Kohberger's dark mind, which he can relate to. BTK also pointed out chilling parallels between his brutal 1974 unalivings of the Otero family in Kansas and the 4 slain University of Idaho students whom Kohberger has been charged with fatally unaliving in an off-campus home. Unalive Thor, much like the Ontarios, up close and personally stabbed, BTK wrote. Although he asphyxiated 4 Ontario family members after tying them up in their Wichita house. He went on to mention that Kohberger left DNA at the crime scene just like he did at the Ontario house, leaving his semen on one person's body. It took police years to link BTK to the crimes after advancements in DNA technology. However, Kohberger was soon connected to the Idaho unalivings after his DNA was found on a sheath, cops say. Lastly, BTK tells us Kohberger may have killed by fantasy homicide, which I did. Of course. BTK was referring to his police confession that he unalived 10 people because of his sexual fantasies. Idaho detectives have not disclosed Kohberger's motive, and he denies any wrongdoing. As we reported before, Kohberger was rumored to have contacted BTK, but BTK denies those allegations. So we have an actual serial unaliver. I hate saying that word, unaliver. We have an actual serial unaliver out here in prison. That's like, yeah, Kohberger totally a serial person. He's totally a serial unaliver. I know him when I see him. I'm one myself. So, I mean, I can't sit here and be like, oh, BTK doesn't know what he's talking about because, I mean, BTK is an expert on stuff like this, obviously. BTK knows more about this type of stuff than we do. So, I take his word for it. I think we all feel the same. I don't think you can look at something like what Bryan did and automatically, like, nowhere in my mind does it feel like this was the first time Bryan maybe did something like this, and nowhere in my mind do I believe if Bryan got away with this, that this would have been the last time. I'm glad Bryan has been caught, because if not, I believe that Bryan would have struck again. Now, I know some people are like, Bryan was probably already riding around looking for things to do to other people. No. I believe that Bryan would have probably waited. Judging by the type of person Bryan is, looking at certain details, I think Bryan maybe would have been one of those type of serial unalivers that lay dormant. When people hear of serial unalivers, God, I hate saying that word, they think of someone who's taken a lot of lives in a short span of time, but that's not always the case. Sometimes someone commits one of these acts, and then they lay low for years, sometimes, years literally, before striking again. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that I think Bryan would have waited 15 years to commit the next act, but I don't think Bryan was going to strike again right away. And I say that because that's how I feel inside, that's my opinion, but also looking at the facts, Bryan stalked the Idaho 4 and cased that house for months on end. So I don't think Bryan's the type of guy that was just going to run in any house and take someone out. No, Bryan stalked the Idaho 4. He watched that house for months and months. Phone pinged, chilling outside of the house in random hours of the night, watching. So if Bryan were to strike again, I believe he would have done the same. Also, for these sick type of individuals, I think that's part of the game. I think that's part of the thrill, part of the excitement. If it was an urge or a thirst that they quickly wanted to quench, then I don't think you would have seen, I don't think there would have been, all of these months in between where we know he was watching them. and then we know when he committed the act. So for Bryan, I think a lot of it was that process. And it's sick to think about. It's sick to even say, but that's the reality. And this is the wicked world that we live in. For Bryan, I think a lot of it was the process. But for now, we sit here and wait. I don't know what the hell is going to happen next. We got freaking BTK speaking out. It's just like we live in a clown world. We live in a freaking clown world when we have serial killers from jail providing true crime commentary for us. But hey, it is what it is. Let me know your thoughts about this down in the comments below. While you're down there, hit the thumbs up button, hit the subscribe button, ring that notification bell, and always remember to remain opinionated.